Good afternoon. Welcome to the National Press Club, the place where news happens. I'm Lisa Nicole Matthews, 114th president of the National Press Club and assignment manager for U.S. Video at the Associated Press. Thank you for joining us today for our Headliners Book and Author program with CNN anchor Don Lemon, author of This is the Fire: What I Say to My Friends About Racism. We'll get started in a moment, but just a reminder that we are happy to accept your questions and will ask as many as time permits. To submit a question, please email headliners@press.org. In the years since George Floyd's murder under the knee of a Minneapolis police officer, race has risen to the top of the American agenda. And journalist Don Lemon, who anchors CNN's 10 p.m. hour, hasn't been shy about keeping it there. Mr. Lemon says his latest book, This is the Fire: What I Say to My Friends About Racism, is intended to keep the discussion about race and racism front and center. He wants his book to help people unpack their biases and have uncomfortable conversations. As he told Essence magazine, quote, "I do believe that it will start a conversation that will open your heart. It will expand your mind and it will give you the tools to begin to make a change," unquote. The book begins with a letter to a young nephew in which he advises, quote, "We must resist racism every single day. We must resist it with love," unquote. Dialogue, he says, can upend social constructs that allow racism to fester. Mr. Lemon, who anchors CNN Tonight with Don Lemon from the network's New York bureau, follows with reporting and reflections on his slave ancestors, his upbringing in the shadows of segregation, and his confrontations with politicians, activists, and scholars. He recounts his visit to the slave port where an ancestor was shackled and shipped to America, and he recalls a slave uprising in Louisiana, just a few miles from his birthplace. He also takes readers to the heart of the 2020 protests in New York City. Mr. Lemon, we are delighted to welcome you to the National Press Club. Let's talk.
Lisa, thank you. Let's talk. I'm so happy to be here. What an introduction, too.
Well, we are very happy to have you. And I have to tell you that I really enjoyed reading this book. I honestly was not sure what to expect from it. So I was very happily pleased. And I really feel like I got an education. So if you could, tell me and our listeners, our viewers, what inspired you? Was there a particular incident that inspired you to write this book?
Well, there were a couple of incidents that inspired me, but then one main incident. So the first was, let me just go back a little bit. I had been asked to write a lot of books during the Trump administration because the former president was obsessed with me and he would talk about me all the time. And people would say, write a book about it. Why don't you write a book about the president and how he's attacking you? And I was like, I don't want to do that. I don't want to be that closely aligned to an administration. And then, Charlottesville happened and that it got me to thinking. I was like, Jesus, this person is not, it's not just cozying up to racists, he's elevating them. And then Ahmaud Arbery happened a couple of years later in Brunswick, Georgia, where he was shot in the middle of the street with a shotgun by two men. And then Breonna Taylor happened, and then George Floyd. So George Floyd was really the inspiration for the book. And people started calling me, asking me, and mainly my white friends, my friends who were not of color, who didn't happen to be African American, saying, this is awful. I don't want to live in a world like this. I don't want my kids to live in a world like this. I don't have the tools to be able to, and the vocabulary to be able to talk to my kids about it. What should I do? I feel like I've let down my Black friends. I've let you down. I haven't understand, some of the things that Black people go through, especially with police. And quite frankly, I didn't really believe that it happened. I just thought maybe it was sort of, it was made up, or, the whole thing, or, that somehow Black people it was hyperbole in some way, like, oh, it can't be that bad. Well, after, fielding many of those calls and texts and emails and conversations, I decided to do This is the Fire and then subtitle it, What I Say to My Friends About Racism, because I had these very, very honest conversations with my friends about what they should do, and how we should deal with it. We, and I say we, not just them. At the end of the day, it's going to be them, but it's also we. It's a collective. It's all of us together. So that was
Yes.
the inspiration for the book.
Last year, that was a very interesting moment in time. I think a lot of Black people experienced that kind of connection with white friends who reached out and asked for advice on how to deal with the situation.
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit more about some of the feedback you received from your friends, your colleagues, professionals you work with?
Well, I was kind of surprised that a lot of them's only Black friend, which was a problem, which I told them was problematic. And I said, who else did you call? And they're like, uh, and then I think it was an epiphany to them that, they knew Black people, but maybe they were colleagues or weren't as close to them as they thought, because they couldn't call them or text them or email them and have, as we call these, uncomfortable conversations. But
Mhm.
mainly it was a lot of moms, quite frankly, saying that they didn't want their kids to grow up in a world like this. Those were the biggest conversations. And, I have 2 kids, I have 3 kids, and I want to be able to teach them better. And I don't have the vocabulary. Basically, that was it.
Mhm.
And, or quite frankly, people who, were maybe somewhere like on the conservative end of the spectrum, and they would say, hey, well, I kind of didn't believe it, but this is proof. And this one is uncovering proof that there are other ones. And the reason that people were so open to this is because we were all vulnerable. Lisa, we were all sitting around in our homes.
Mhm.
Some of us may have had COVID. Some family members may have had it. We had no idea if we were going to have a job the next day, if we were going to get COVID ourselves, if our friends were going to survive. And so we were all open and vulnerable at that point and sitting in our homes because we couldn't go anywhere. We were
Mhm.
literally locked in and watching these images on the screen, George Floyd's death, and then the protests and the unrest that followed. So the conversations were then, because people were open and vulnerable, they were quite frank. And I held people to account, and I told them, you've got to do the work. It can't just be me.
Right.
And when I say do the work, it's not like, I'm telling people you have homework. No, you've got to be a good citizen. You have to be a good person and see your fellow citizens' humanity. That's all I'm asking. I'm not saying go home and jot it down and then say, okay, tomorrow I'm going to do this. If you want to do that, that's fine. Great. You don't have to do that. You can just be a decent, empathetic human being.
Well, speaking of being decent, empathetic human beings, um, one that you definitely have said is not a decent human being is our former president, Donald Trump. Do you think that he is somehow responsible for the
Yes.
racism? Wow. Wow. Okay. Let me
Go on, finish your
for the
question.
okay, so let me just say this coming out of Charlottesville, for the racism, the attitude, the entitlement attitude that we're seeing in our country right now.
Of course, and I think he bears responsibility for what happened at the Capitol. I think he bears responsibility for um, the um, the posture that some people have towards Asian people in the country now. I'm not saying that he is directly responsible for the attacks, but it certainly doesn't help when he calls it the China flu or and that sort of thing. So I think he does bear some responsibility for that. Of course, he bears responsibility for race because he has denied systemic racism. He has called African countries shithole countries. He has called Black athletes sons of bitches. He told Black people, what else do you have to lose? You walk out of your house, you get shot. He is responsible for housing discrimination with his father, for wanting to send the Central Park exonerated five to jail or prison forever, or the death penalty, or whatever that is, and took out full-page ads. So he is responsible. He is the birther king. So yes, of course he is. Do you need any more evidence? What more do I have to tell you? This is
Well,
not an opinion. This is a fact.
so in his GOP response to President Biden's address to Congress, it wasn't quite a State of the Union. Uh, Tim Scott from North Carolina said that the United States is not a racist country. So for people like a Tim Scott, what do you say back to him that, and it can't rest on a single individual and that this country's not racist?
Well, there have been a number of people. The vice president said it, and he said it, and I would just say I have to disagree with both of them. I will respectfully disagree with the vice president, and I disagree with Tim Scott as well. This is a racist country. Look at the history of the country. Look at what it was built on. Look at how it has not dealt with racism in a substantial way. Look at it is not dealt with. And when I say reparations, I'm not talking about handing people checks. I'm talking about paying it forward in a way that is helpful and that can help to move the country forward. There hasn't been an official apology for slavery. We keep pretending that now everything is equal. We want everything to be equal now when it wasn't equal for centuries. So how do you expect out of 60 years since the civil rights movement that everything is going to be equal, that the playing field is equal? And I write in my book about pulling yourself up by the bootstraps. And I write about the game that people are
playing. I actually tried to do that. It
doesn't work.
No, it doesn't.
There's a thing called gravity, right? That pulls you back down. But I write in my book about, going around the racetrack or going around the Monopoly board or what have you. And then all of a sudden, everyone else has been around 20 times and has reaped the benefits and the rewards of it, has been able to acquire wealth and education and everything that goes along with that, and has been able to vote. And then finally, when you get to, it's your chance at the starting line, they say, okay, now everything is equal for everybody. How is that even possible? That doesn't even make that defies logic. It doesn't make sense. So I respectfully disagree with the vice president and with Tim Scott, and I'll leave it at that for that part.
So, something else that you talked about in your book, and it seemed to me that at some point you were evolving from a discussion about racism to the caste system, which I don't know that everyone is familiar with the caste system. So I know I learned about it for the first time in my younger days when I was producing.
Oh, I thought you learned about it through Isabel Wilkerson, but yeah, I learned about it. I lived in India for a minute.
Okay.
And the caste system there is crazy.
So can you explain first to our listeners who may not know what the caste system is, because I think that most people may not know what it is and how it's related to the situation we find ourselves in the United States today.
Well, I mean, it's just based on a made-up system of where people have different realms in society, where you can be strata or whatever, where you belong. Sometimes it's based on skin color, which is what America's about. Sometimes it's based on its socioeconomics. Sometimes it's based on anything. It could be based on hair type. It could be based on which tribe you come from or anything as to where you fit into society and how you're treated in a society. And so it just so happens that that ours is based on racism. But if you look at what happened in India and Germany and so on in other countries, they actually took a cue from the United States, because the United States just made it simple and said, we're just gonna do it by skin color. And everyone said, well, wow, they're doing it by skin color and they're doing it by men and women. They're just so obvious with it. We're gonna take a cue from them and borrow from the United States and use their caste system and our system. Isabel Wilkerson explains it a lot better than me. And I encourage you, if you haven't read that book, you should read it, because then you'll learn about a caste system. Racism in America is basically a caste system that's based on race.
It's also economically led, right?
Yeah.
I mean, you talk about that. I mean, that's the heavy, I noted when we were off air talking about you taking those cutting boards back to the shop in Sag Harbor. It's important for people to understand, right? The role that how racism and the economy are kind of linked, and the power that people actually could have over it.
It's all based on, I mean, listen, when you look at slavery, that was based on money. That was based on the economy, right? It was based on capitalism. The cotton wasn't going to pick itself, right? And so someone had to do that. And everyone wants cheap labor because they want more profits. And the cheapest labor you can have is free labor, people who work for free. And so I write about that in the book, and I write how it's tied into every single industry, the movie industry, the banking industry, everything, the entertainment, like politics, it's all based on capitalism. And so I do believe that what will help solve the problem is we're going to solve the problem through relationships and getting to know each other. But I really think that maybe the biggest way to solve the problem, the more substantial and influential way, is through money. And it's through who you spend your money with.
So is that what they're doing? I mean,
Yeah.
do you think that what they're doing in Georgia,
Yes.
okay, all of those different, you know, we're not going to buy, we're not going to have Major League Baseball game in Georgia, I'm not going to produce my movie in Georgia. Is that really going to be effective, or are we,
Yeah, I think if enough people get behind it, yes. I do think it's going to be effective, because that's when you get people's attention, when you start to affect their pocketbooks. Someone can say whatever they want to say about you, Lisa, and you'll say, okay, fine, sticks and stones don't break my bones. But then if someone starts to take away money where you can afford to take care of yourself, you can't afford to take care of yourself or your family, or put food on the table, or pay your car payment, or pay your mortgage, or whatever it is that you can't do, however it is they affect you financially, that is going to get your attention. And I think that's what's happening in states where there is voter suppression. Now, the interesting thing is that a lot of people who are a lot smarter than me, I should say some people who are a lot smarter than me and who happen to be in charge of those governments, local governments in those states, they will tell you that a lot of it can be lip service. They'll say, I don't want to do this, we're not going to hold this here, and then we're not going to hold our event here or there. And then once that particular party takes its seat in government or gets elected in that state, then those same companies will start to donate to them politically.
So in this whole situation with the 2.0 Jim Crow, okay,
Yeah.
A company like, say, a Coca-Cola or others, what's your advice to them, or how do you direct those companies to stand tall and to, I guess, stand up to the politicians?
Well, the people I know who usually buy those products and use those products and indulge in all of those things aren't the elite who are shopping at, for organic food and in high-end markets, and who don't buy sodas and Coca-Cola. And, so normal everyday people buy those products, use those products. And a lot of those are Black and brown people.
Right.
Black, brown, Asian, a lot of those people are our people.
Right.
And a lot of those people also work in those companies and help to put those products out there. So they have a responsibility to their employees, to their company, to the culture of their company. And if someone no longer represents the best interests or the morals of your company, then you don't have to use your product to help whatever it is or whatever place that they are. Mm-hmm. And so I think that's how you get employers to understand that you're speaking for the people who work, and not only the people who use your products, but for the people who work in your companies as well.
Yeah, that's good stuff. So we're starting to get some questions now from our viewers and listeners. I think I know the answer to this question, just based on my talk with you. And I read your book like twice, seriously.
Oh, wow.
So, well, it was really
good. You can't do that. And when you want to read it twice, you have to buy another one, because you never know, you could change some things. I'm kidding.
No, we'll see. When you join the press club, you just come and sign it for me. Okay, how about that?
All right.
But here's the question. What chapter of the book was the most emotional or hardest for you to write?
It was a part, no doubt, the part about my sister was very emotional. And it was emotional to write, but it was harder to read it back out loud. Because as I was writing it, it was sort of it was catharsis, right? And it's just kind of getting it out. It was very emotional. And I was like, I need to say these things, and I'm so glad that I got it out, right? And I wrote about it, and it was very emotional. But the reading back of it was the thing that got me. And then, and not necessarily reading. When I read it back, when I looked at the chapters, it was fine. I read it back. But once I started to read it aloud for the audio version of the book, is when it took me. I had to keep stopping. I couldn't get through it. I couldn't get through it because I was crying, and I also couldn't get through it because I was crying and I couldn't read the words on the page. And I think when you listen to the audiobook, you can hear that I get emotional. But that was the hardest part, talking about my sister. But that incident, my sister's death, changed my life and gave me an urgency about why I'm here on this earth that I think is reflected in me personally in my work every single day.
I got to tell you that I absolutely love the closeness that you have with your mom. I'm very close to my mom, and I think it's a very special bond that sons have with their moms. And coming off of Mother's Day, you think about, what an important role they play in your life. And your mother, I mean, she really, I mean, you talked about how when you came out, she embraced you, your trip to Africa. Talk a little bit more.
Girl. My mom had been, I wrote on Instagram yesterday, it was a picture of me and her I think it was probably like around 1970. We were standing on a bank of some river or lake or something in Louisiana, and had been fishing. And I said, we had been rocking it together or something since 66. Because it's been me and my mom together with that special bond since I was a kid. And she taught me a lot, not everything I know about the world, but she gave me the strength and the character to be able to do what I do, to be able to live in this world, to be able to be free. And sometimes I surprise her, to be able to have the autonomy that I had, and to be a completely emancipated person. And I think she, more than anyone else, knows that it's tough for people like me. It's tough for Black men in this society. It's tough for all of us. It's tough for Black people anywhere. It's tough for my Asian brothers and sisters. It's tough for all of us, but especially Black men. She knows how tough it is for us to be able to escape, not going to jail, or
Yeah.
even be alive after a certain age, either because of crime or police, an incident with a police officer, or health reasons. And so
Right.
here I am thriving, on a major news channel every night with this great job and career, and to have the attitude and to be able to experience what I experience every day. She gets it.
Interesting that you use the phrase completely emancipated.
Yes, I am a completely emancipated person.
That's yeah, let's get a
I
t-shirt.
don't really care what people think about me. I'm free to go and be and do whatever I want in this society, and that's what you see every single night on television.
That's cool, because that kind of leads me to my next question, because what you do on your show, some might call advocacy journalism. Um, how do you feel about your role in that perch at 10 o'clock? Because you've got a lot of eyeballs, you've got people who are paying attention to you. Are you doing advocacy journalism in that role, or are you giving it to people straight?
No, I'm not doing advocacy. I'm telling the truth. And we have been, led to believe, we've been deceived for so long that speaking out on behalf of Black and brown people, on women, of marginalized people, of underserved communities, that's somehow advocacy. That's what America is. That's a role of a journalist. That's a role of an American, to be able to speak out for people. I'm not advocating for anything. The only thing I'm advocating for is the truth, and I'm trying to inform people. So I'm not advocating on behalf of a Democrat or a Republican, but what I am, I'm speaking truth to power. I'm telling power the truth about who they are, about who we are as Americans. So I don't see that as advocacy. I'm not pushing for one thing. If you want to say that I'm an advocate for the truth, then I would say, okay, fine, you're right about that. But because I talk about issues that affect Black people, that affect women, that affect Jewish people, that affect Muslim people, that affect Asian people, that affect Latinos, because I talk about those issues, it doesn't mean that I'm advocating for anything. I'm just putting them into the fore, just like the larger culture's issues are always put to the fore by every other journalist who's on television who doesn't look like me. And that is everyone else in primetime other than me, because I'm the only Black person on primetime in cable. So come on.
Yeah, I hear you. So speaking of the truth, and I learned, like I said, I learned a lot of things reading your book, and I had no idea that there was a such thing as this German slave uprising,
German Coast Uprising,
German
yeah.
Coast uprising. Talk about that and being so close to that and realizing that, that was like right in your backyard that happened.
Yeah, I know, but I didn't really know that much. I didn't learn about it in the history books. I learned about that as an adult. I learned about that actually researching the book and talking about things. These are the reason I wrote about the German Coast Uprising, which was when Baton Rouge, excuse me, not long after Baton Rouge had started. There were between Baton Rouge and New Orleans, there were slaves who wanted to be free, and they came up with this plan to free themselves. And a lot of them got killed, and they ended up getting killed by their white owners and the white people who happened to live in that place. And it was a German, they called it the German coast then, but in Louisiana. So I mean, it's quite a simple story. I mean, it's happened over and over. It happened in Tulsa. It's happened before. Anytime that Black people got a degree of self-assuredness and self-purpose, and began to have their own businesses and homes and begin to progress, they have been time and time again, I'm going to say shot down for lack of a better word, but tried to be, the people have fought to exterminate them,
Right.
to keep their knee on their neck, to push them down. And so that happened with the German Coast Uprising. And the reason I put that in there is because there's so much of our history that we don't know, that's not written about. American history from the very beginning, whenever you start to learn it in first grade, in 1472 or 1872.
Jamestown.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Columbus sailed the ocean blue. And you're like,
Yeah.
okay, no, that's not what happened.
Yeah.
So, I always say Columbus, excuse me, the Europeans conquered America. They didn't discover America. America was here. Ask Native Americans, and they'll tell you, they'll be offended if you tell them, well, but Columbus discovered America. There was no discovering America. So from the very beginning of our history, the history is used to elevate some and to denigrate others. And it's used to elevate white people and to denigrate people of color and Native Americans and anybody else who's not white. And it's just not written about. And there's so many things like that when you look at the 1619 Project, when you look at many other things that just we don't know about and it's not talked about. And so I put that in there, and I put other examples of that so that people can, it would just make you start to think, and then you can start doing your own research.
Yeah, it's just horrendous, some of the things that, that I'm learning. And I'm glad that you included that in the book. I have to ask you about Confederate statues, because you kind of addressed the whole issue of staying true to our history, the importance
Right.
of knowing and understanding the truth. But how do you square that with what's going on when they were pulling down, the statues to their Confederate heroes and things like that? I mean, is that still not a part of history that people need to know about? Or is it just about positioning of that history?
What's the question again? How do I what?
How do you square it? I mean, because there was a point in the book where you talked about, you want to get rid of all of that stuff, all the stuff, but then when you went back and you talked about the statues, but you don't want to necessarily pull those down, or do you?
Well, I think each one, as I write in the book, it's all individual.
Okay.
It's all an individual basis. Listen, I would not want to go to a Robert E. Lee High School because he was a horrible slave owner and he was an insurrectionist, right? So would you want to go to a school that's named after the person who wanted to keep you enslaved? No. Would you want a statue of that person erected in your town? Well, it depends on if the true story of the statue is on the town square or wherever that statue is. I would say that those things belong in a museum where there's history and context around them. I don't want to necessarily pull those down because I think it's important to teach kids about what was before so that it doesn't happen again. And I think it's the same way with movies. I think all of it can be instructive and illustrative, excuse me. And so I think that it depends on the situation. Yeah, do I like Birth of a Nation? No. But will I watch it? Yes. Do I think people should watch it? Yes. Do I think there should be context and study and around it? Absolutely, 100%. But I don't want it yanked off of. I don't want it just shown on a television where people are like, what is this?
Right.
It's the same thing as I write in the book about Gone with the Wind.
Yes, I was gonna
Like
say.
there were no happy slaves. Like, hey, we're so happy to be slaves. And again, that's about our history. Again, in 1492. Columbus sailed the ocean blue and discovered. No, that's not where our history starts.
Yeah, I appreciate the fact that you reminded the reader or even the listener of the book if they've got the audiobook that in Gone with the Wind, for example, that those Black actors at the time were doing what they had to do, what all they could do, right?
In those very limited roles.
Right.
So sometimes in the very limited role that you have, when they give you that little screen time and that demeaning a role, the only thing that you can do is this.
Smile bigger, Don.
Right. Smile bigger. That's the only thing you can do is, I don't know nothing about birth and no babies, smile it. So, so I think that by removing those movies, and getting rid of them, then I think you're doing a disservice. And my mother agreed because we had this conversation. I think you're doing a disservice to the Black actresses who really had to fight so hard, even for those very limited roles, where Hattie McDaniel won an Oscar for the role. And so you don't want to erase those people from history or put them in the corner or marginalize them because of something else that's bigger. You want to explain why they had those limited roles and what they were doing in those moments and how they were taking that and taking every opportunity within that and acting in a way that the other actors didn't quite understand or probably couldn't do because they were free to have whatever choice that they wanted. They were free to experience roles that were not limited as just being a maid or a cook or a housekeeper.
So this is not related to that.
And by the way, Butterfly and the Queen stole the show. I mean, come on, don't you think?
That's true. That
I don't know. You may think it's denigrated, and listen, I cringe.
Yeah.
But guess what? From
that's what everybody knows.
From that movie, frankly, my dear, I don't give a damn.
And
I don't know nothing about birth and babies.
That's exactly right. Yeah, she stole the show. Yeah.
Yeah.
So this is a question from one of our listeners, which doesn't really have anything to do with this. We're going to go back we're coming back to today. You said you don't agree with former colleague Brooke Baldwin's charge that CNN was dominated by men. And while you've correctly pointed out, a lot of the executive producers on CNN are women. As you know, all of the top overall editorial jobs are male.
I don't know that. It's not necessarily true.
Well, I'm reading the question from the viewer, okay? So are changes needed at CNN and other places, basically? Is it time for the person running daytime programming to be a woman? Okay,
so let me say this. I don't want to mansplain for anybody. I just think that that whole assessment about CNN is wrong. Excuse me, wrong because I work there. There are plenty of CNN is overrepresented. Now, can it be better? Absolutely, anything can be better. We can be better with diversity of all kinds, women, Blacks, Asians, all kinds of people. We can be better. But the assessment of CNN as a top-heavy male, at least on the editorial side, male company is just false. It's just not true. The person who runs CNN Films, a doc unit that I did last night, is run by Amy and Tillis, a woman. The CMO of my company, Allison Gallas, is a woman. The woman who runs Washington, D.C., the political unit, and which is the head of D.C., is a woman. The woman who ran daytime for CNN for a long time, she now happens to be at NBC, was a woman. So, I mean, we have the woman who did the hiring, the chief lawyer for CNN was a woman. And so the person who runs my show is a woman. Hang on. The person who runs Chris Cuomo's show is a woman. The person who runs Aaron Burnett's show is a woman. And so my senior producer, the number 2 on my show is a woman. The number 2 on Chris's show, not on Chris's show, but we are overrepresented with women. So that whole assessment about, I'm not going to mansplain, but I'm just saying that assessment about CNN is just wrong. Now, you can criticize CNN for other things, but for its representation of women, I don't think that CNN deserves that criticism. Now, can it be run by a woman when Jeff leaves, or should it be? Absolutely. If it's a very qualified woman, I would welcome that. We want someone who can run the company. I don't care if it's a man or woman or whatever it is. And I think that, and listen, the woman who used to run CNN at one point, Taya Ryan, was a woman. So I just don't agree with that assessment of CNN. I just disagree with that. And I think as far as women go, as far as it goes for women, my PR person is a woman. I just think that I don't want to offend the women who work there and who have very high-powered, influential roles in the company, because that's diminishing them. They keep this company running. They keep Jeff and other male executives in check. And I want to give them their props rather than saying, we need to have more women. That's easy to say, but it's not the reality at CNN.
Okay, so viewer, I hope you know that Don just gave you 3 snaps and a twist and talk to the hand all in one. Okay, so just letting you know that's what he just did. So what about CNN? So usually when Trump was president, he'd always talk about the Washington Post, but he also talked about CNN.
Right.
Okay. So how relevant is CNN in a post-Trump world? There are, I guess it was the New York Times that said CNN is in a post-Trump slump.
Mm-hmm.
How do you carry on the battle when your protagonist is gone?
Well, I don't agree that CNN is in a post-Trump slump. That again, that's someone else's headline and someone else's assessment. I think CNN is doing just fine. And here's what people don't realize is that, yes, we value our advertisers and we love that, but that's not the main income stream for CNN. It's done through how many people subscribe to this, how many people subscribe to that plug that goes into the back of your television. That all has more to do with the success of CNN than does how many people are watching on any given night. And whenever there is real news, I shouldn't say real news, whenever there is big breaking news, guess who everyone turns to? On a big political night, on a big breaking news night, it doesn't exist. It is not real unless CNN says it. So you can go to any other cable network and any other broadcast network, but guess what? No one is going to believe it until it is a headline on CNN. And that is a company brand that has been built over decades. So I don't think we're in a post-Trump slump. Yes, our protagonist is gone because CNN is about the truth. CNN is about giving real information. And real information was not on the side of that person. The truth was not on the side of that person. And that's why he made us, he created the antagonistic relationship with CNN and himself. Because what do you do when the truth is not on your side?
Right.
About the person or whatever it is that is telling the truth about you. You try to impugn their reputation. Nice. You try to impugn their credibility because you know they're telling the truth about you, and the only way to damage them is to lie about them and create a narrative about them. So that's what Donald Trump did to us. CNN is just fine. We're thriving and doing better than ever. And we're happy. And I'll speak for me. I won't speak for CNN. I am happy that he is not in office and creating the chaos and toxicity all over the world. And that we have a finally, doesn't matter. It doesn't, I don't care if it could have been a Mitt Romney. It could have been a Republican. I don't care. I'm not speaking about Democrat or Republican. Finally, we have someone who is credible and who is confident and who has the capability of running the United States of America. Donald Trump did not have that.
One of the things that you know, hey, I'm not going there. I'm not even touching it. Okay, out there. One of the things that you mention in the book is about you talk about our changing demographics in this country,
Mhm.
and how there's fear attached to the changing demographic. How do we overcome that fear that's associated with the changing demographic?
How do we overcome? Well, I'm not fearful of it. You mean how do we get the people who are afraid of it to change that? Because the fear is that they will do to us. Well, part of the fear is that they will do to us what we did to them. That's part of the fear and lurking in the back of people's heads. But the other part is that they will no longer have a preeminent voice, that they will no longer be at the front of the line, that everything will not revolve around them. And I mean, that is the truth. But that's the way the world works. That's how societies evolve. That's how countries evolve. That's how things change. Just people are afraid of change. Change isn't always bad. And I think, we are in constant change. Your hair is longer than when you started this, right? You have you have less or more of something than when we started this. We have less energy than when we started because we are burning the energy from when we woke up this morning. We're expending the energy. Everything changes. America is not going to stay the same. And so I think the way that you get people to not be so fearful is to educate them and to get them to move along and see other people's humanity. Because if they saw the people who they're afraid of and they're trying to keep down as human beings, if they were able to experience that humanity and that dignity, then they wouldn't be so fearful of it, because they would have relationships with people who don't look like them or who don't think like them. So am I fearful of a white person? No. Am I fearful of a Democrat? No. Am I fearful of a Republican? No. Am I fearful of an independent or libertarian? No. Why? Because I know every single one of those people, kinds of people like that. Republicans, Democrats, I know them. I'm not afraid of them. I have relationships with them. So therefore, I'm not fearful about, well, what if the Republicans take over next time? What am I going to do? I'm just going to keep moving. What if the Democrats take over next time? What am I going to do? I'm just going to keep moving. What if there's a Black president? What am I going to do? I'm just going to keep moving, because I'm not afraid of anybody.
So
You're not ready for me at 2:40 in the afternoon.
Honey, it's all good. It's all good. I'm ready for you. It's just that, I have to maintain a certain level of, moving it on.
I understand, but it's the same thing as the people in the Congress and the Senate who said that they weren't afraid of the insurrectionists. Why? Because the insurrectionists look like them. They thought the insurrectionists had their best interest at heart. But if it had been Antifa or Black Lives Matter, they would have been afraid. What does that tell you?
Actually, if it would have
been Black folks.
Yeah, well, yes, exactly right. That's why they cross the street when they see you coming, or they lock their doors when they see you coming.
Or they try to keep you from voting.
Yes.
When they see you coming.
Exactly. So you said that you're not telling people to take to the streets, but you gave some very specific, these are the things that we need to do to move forward. And I'm going back to your book, because I meant to make a note of this to myself, but you even have these in bold, the steps. There are 4 steps that folks need to take to get to the other side. Talk about those.
So to get to the other side, I said there were 4 steps.
I think there were 4.
I don't remember that. But the very simple part of it is I say that you need to, again, this is all doing the work. You have to listen.
Right.
You have to try to expand your mind, right? You have to surround yourself with people who don't look like you or try to, right? Get a friend who doesn't look like you, right? And then you have to do the work. Meaning, when people say, "Oh, you got to do," you need to find a. When I say find a friend who looks like you, or try to live a more inclusive life of other people, and they say, "Well, that's hard, especially for older people, or especially for a mom who's busy. I'm so busy, or dad is busy." No, it's not. Stop making excuses. It's not that hard. So if you're a mom and you have a kid and you're like, "Oh my God, my kid's in school, I'm doing this," you're in the drop-off line. How tough is it for you to the car behind you? I'm just using an example. If you're a white lady and Miss Lopez is in the car behind you, or two cars behind you, or if you see Miss Lopez in the store, at a school event, or your son's baseball game, to say, "Hey, listen, we're having a cookout on Sunday. I know that Billy and Hector are on the same team, and we don't get to spend. I would like to get to know you. Why don't you guys come to our house for the cookout on Saturday or Sunday?"
Mm-hmm.
Or, "I know that you go to the Catholic church, we go to the Baptist church, we're having a church social on whatever. Would you guys like to come? It would be great to get to know you." It is so simple. I do it all the time. But people just don't want to do it because it's easy for them to live in their bubble and to not interact with people who don't look like them. Most of us, listen, I'm not saying it's well-meaning people. It's not, done with they're not doing it with either, with reasons, with malice. Thank you for the word. They're just doing it because it's easy to do. It's easy for, for the mom who looks like you and dresses like you and drives the same SUV, for you too, because you get each other, you know each other. When you see each other, you know each other. But when you see the other person who doesn't look like you, you don't know that, so you may be a little bit afraid of it. But once you get to know it, you might find it's cool, and it expands your horizons and who you are. And it also helps your kids and your family and your husband, because then it makes you better citizens. So that's, for me, that is what is going to make a difference. It's really relationships. Unless we have relationships, it's not going to change.
So something that I asked you before we started, is this really something that is possible? And I know you touched on this when you said that people are afraid of change. Yeah, I want to share something with you that
yeah, I'm listening.
When the one thing for me with some of my white friends, like, I can always tell that whether I'm like the only Black friend they have when their baby or their kids kind of look at me like with eyes like this, or they're, or they're like really like, whoa, oh my goodness. And
the kids don't want you to go home.
And they or they're amazed with you.
Yeah. Yeah.
My very best friend, I'm the aunt to her kids, and they're white. And I will never forget when her son looked at me and looked at her and said, "How can Aunt Lisa be my aunt and she's Black?" You touched on how kids like point out the truth.
Yeah.
Like, is Beverly, that basically what we need to do, is just be more truthful, be more in the face?
Yes, in the face, be more truthful, and then start teaching kids early before it becomes a crisis, or before. What's your friend's name?
Her name's Susan.
Susan. Was she like, "Oh my God," when the kids?
No. Actually, we all laughed about it.
Okay, then that's great. That's what
we all laughed about it, because she and I have been friends forever, and I'm the auntie to both of her kids. But this one moment, where Mikey was like, "This is weird."
So as I write about in the book, Beverly Tatum, who I interviewed for my podcast, and I wrote about her in this book, and she said, you should start kids as young when they start to ask questions. Her daughter came home and said, "Am I Black because I drink chocolate milk?" Right. That was a perfect opportunity for her to begin a conversation with her daughter about racism.
Right.
And so when Susan's daughter?
Her son.
A son. When Susan's son said, "How can you be his aunt when you're Black?" Perfect opportunity. Boom, open.
Right.
Go right in, have that conversation.
Right.
So, that's like when kids say, mommy, what is that? Why does, or if a little boy says, mommy, that doesn't look like my parts.
Right.
Perfect opportunity for the mom to say, well, yeah, Johnny, that's a penis, and I don't know. And
Right.
it's the same thing with race. It's just that simple. It's just
People,
that simple. We should be more bold in the face and talk about those issues. But here's, why you can do that? Because you have a relationship with Susan.
right.
Because you guys love each other. Because
Right.
you trust each other.
Right.
Because you rely on each other. You couldn't do that with some random person that you didn't know. It would be weird, right? So you have to get to know people.
Yeah. Okay. So before I ask the final question, let me take a moment to thank the organizers of today's event, and it has been a good talk. Headliners, co-team leaders Donna Linewan and Lori Russo. Today's headliner event coordinator, Alyssa Free. Club Communications Director, Lindsay Underwood, and Club Executive Director, Bill McCarran. I'd also like to tell you guys about some upcoming National Press Club headliners. On May 12th, Gabrielle Cateris, actor and president of the Screen Actors Guild American Federation of Television and Radio Artists, also known as SAG-AFTRA, will deliver a speech entitled A Movement in the Making, Worker Power Post-Pandemic. Trying to say that 3 times. And on May 13th, we'll hear from Mark Bittman. He is the former New York Times columnist, food writer, and best-selling author. He's going to discuss his new book, Animal Vegetable Junk, A History of Food from Sustainable to Suicidal. And finally, on May 18th, we will welcome Indianapolis Colts linebacker and team captain Zaire Franklin, Colts owner and CEO Jim Irsay, and Colts Vice Chair and owner Kaylin Jackson to talk about the mental health initiative, Kicking the Stigma. So please join us for those chats. They're going to be really good too. Now for our last questions. So first of all, Don.
Yes.
Where did you find time to write a book? I mean, it's hard enough getting up every day and doing the work that we do. Okay.
All right.
How did you find time to write the book, and how did you decide how you wanted to follow the order of the book?
Okay. So I wrote a book in 2011, 10 years ago, and I said I didn't want to write another book because it's really tough. It is. You put yourself out there, you don't know if people are they're going to be receptive, or they're going to hate it, they're going to buy it, or whatever. You don't know what the criticism, whatever, critics, you don't know. And so I said I wasn't going to write a book, but then I was inspired to write this book. So I was commuting every day, 2 hours to and from work. I was living in Long Island, and because my partner during the pandemic wanted to be near his family. And we lived in a big building, lots of contact with people. In the beginning of the quarantine, the beginning of COVID, nobody knew.
Right.
And so and it was like, well, I have to work every day, but I have to make this compromise. I understand these are unusual times. He doesn't want to be in the city. Fine. I'm going to be in the city every day, and I'm also going to be at my house every day. So I would commute 2 hours each way every day into the city. And I thought that I was going to kill myself, that, oh my gosh, this is going to be really tough. But you know what, Lisa? In that, in the 2 hours that I was in the car to work and from work is actually when I got my thoughts together. And I would say things into this phone after I would get off at night. I would get off at midnight, or sometimes later if there was breaking news. And I would talk about what I had done in the day and what I would want to include in the book, or how I can include the conversation I had on television, or thoughts that I had while working on the show. And I'd put it in the phone. And then I would grab this laptop that I'm on now, and I would write stuff into it. And then I would wake up in the morning, and I would call my collaborator after I'd emailed it to her. And she would say, I love the paragraph you wrote. That's really beautiful. Let me help you out with this sentence, blah, blah, blah. Maybe we should say this other thing that you wrote. I know that you wanted it for here, but what if we moved it into the policing chapter? And I would say, that's really great. And so then we would put stuff together, and then we would send it to the publisher, and the publisher would go, that's great. And we did that almost every day, weekly. And the publisher was like, wait, you guys are going way too fast. This is awesome. And so the thing that I thought would be a hindrance actually was a thing that helped me write the book quickly, because it gave me discipline and a structure that I would not have had if I weren't in that car for 2 hours, for 4 hours every single day.
Wow.
That's how I did it.
Wow.
And lots of late nights talking, because I'm a night person. And so I would just get on the phone and talk, and I'd be on my computer and I'd be talking to the, and we would both be, she's like, oh my God, you're so great. So when you said such and such and such and such, and you wrote blah, 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 she goes, what if you put this word right there, this word? And I'd go, yes, that works. You're great. Yes. And so that's how we did it. And then we'd send it to the publisher, and sometimes they'd go, nah, we don't like this. And we'd go, all right, I got to start all over again. I'm going to write something. I got to go to bed, and I'll send it to you tomorrow. Call me in the afternoon. That's how we did it.
That's probably very instructive to other journalists out there who are hoping to write their own book someday.
But the thing, I also knew what I wanted to talk about. I knew I wanted to talk about history that we didn't get here by accident. I knew that I wanted to talk about policing, because that's where what we're dealing with now. I knew I wanted to tell people about monuments when I write about monuments in movies and that sort of thing. I knew I wanted to tell people about reparations. So I had all of these ideas about the chapters that I wanted, but I didn't want it to be a long book. I wanted it to be short and concise, like The Fire Next Time, which is one of my original copies, by the way, right here, with all of my old notes from the late 80s and early 90s in the book. So I wanted to be a short, concise book like this book, and it ended up being that, short and concise. And
yeah, it's definitely a tight book.
Yeah,
great for summer reading.
I wanted it to be, if I'm gonna do anything that's remotely related to James Baldwin, like This Is the Fire Next Time, I said this book must be beautifully written.
Well, yeah. It is.
Thank you.
So we've got 4 minutes, and can you give me a 30-second answer on what you think about reparations in Chicago?
Ooh, in Chicago specifically, I don't know enough about reparations in Chicago. I can give you what I think generally about reparations. Do I think there should be reparations? I do, but I don't want people to take that out of context to think that I'm saying that we should be handing out checks to people in the country. I think that there's a way to pay it forward by having, better education and equity in education, that we can take the racism out of the criminal justice system, that we can take the inequities out of policing and that sort of thing. So when I say reparations, that's what I mean by reparations, paying it forward, not paying it back. Because by paying it forward, you actually do pay it back.
Okay, final question.
Mm-hmm.
Really, final question. In the book, it's something that you and Tim do, where you kind of talk about what's the high and what's the low.
Oh my God, he's so corny with that.
Oh my God, so I have to
come here. She's asking me about highs and lows.
Highs and lows. So hi, Tim.
Highs and lows.
National Press Club. Good to see you.
And what do I say when you ask for highs and lows?
So I wanted to ask you, what's the high and low of this year so far for you?
For us?
Yeah, for you guys as a couple, but also in the world of news. What's been your high? What's been your low?
So the high has been, quite honestly, the success of this book, and that people are actually getting it, and the outcome of the Chauvin trial. That was a high. The lows and the high is that our family, quite honestly, during quarantine, we got to spend time together for a long time. It actually made us closer as a family. And the lows have been the unrest that happened around the country, and of course the death of George Floyd. That was a low. And that's it, right? What do you think? And we also get to talk to each other. We got to talk to each other a lot about race.
Yeah.
And what do you think?
I think you got it. We love doing highs and lows here.
No, he loves highs and lows. I'm like, really?
I think they're good. I'm down with Tim. Yeah, I'm down with Tim on that. Well, thank you so much. And what's the name of this dog?
This is Boomer.
Hi, Boomer.
This is Gus. We got Gus he's a pandemic. That's our foster fail.
Foster fail.
And that's Barkley. That's Boomer's original brother.
Well, I love the complicated.
They have a book coming out, by the way.
I love the complicated dogs. And I really enjoyed talking to you, Don. And
Thank you. God bless you
you're
guys.
going to receive a letter from me asking you to please join the National Press Club.
Oh, great. Thank you. Let me see. I know I need a ring with it. Okay.
We'll see what we can do.
This is a real pleasure. Thank you. And I hope that, please, everyone, get the book. And it will, I think it's a unifying book. It's not divisive. And I do think it'll help. Thank you.
Very informative. Thanks for joining us, Don.
Thanks. Bye, everyone. Have a great day. Be well.